Hi everyone, so glad you made it to my YouTube channel. Things have been a little hectic for me. I'm on the intravenous antifungals because, as you know, I just spent a month at Mass General for a bloodstream fungal infection that turned septic and a UTI and a belly full of gallstones that they can't operate on because my condition is too far advanced for me to safely undergo any sorts of operations. I am on the intravenous antifungal all the way through the middle of December, and I just had to start an IV antibiotic last night because on top of the bloodstream fungal infection, I have a superbug infection in my urine and will need to be on the IV antibiotics for 10 days. Plus, I'm developing bed sores on my bottom that hurt like crazy. But my awesome team of direct care workers is right on top of that. I just sometimes feel like I can't catch a break. But then I think of all the amazing things I do have going for me, like my support system, the fact that I have this amazing Build-A-Bear collection that makes me feel so comforted and that I love playing with and dressing with and talking to, my writing, my book that's coming out, the books I've already published, my blog, my website, and I squash all those other thoughts about not catching a break because I do catch breaks and I do have a meaningful life. And I'm not going to minimize that. Today I will be reading from chapter 4 of Saving Destiny. Except for my memoir that is not yet complete, out of all the books I've written, Saving Destiny most closely mirrors my life, although many parts of it have been fictionalized to make it a novel. Destiny had been doing fabulous working with Tessa, her therapist, that had diagnosed her with childhood onset schizoaffective disorder, and she had seen and had a long evaluation by Dr. Wallace, the leading child psychopharmacologist in the country, who wrote up a treatment plan for her with lots of ideas to treat what she also decided was childhood onset schizoaffective disorder. But then, 6 months before her 17th birthday, the bad man broke through because her meds weren't getting properly absorbed. As her gastroparesis symptoms began flaring up and causing her stomach to not break down the meds, or to not break them down for days at a time, and then absorb them all at once, causing Destiny to pass out and sleep all day. The bad man and the storyteller kept breaking through enough to tell her to stop taking her meds and store them up to overdose on and kill herself so that her parents wouldn't die on her birthday and the world as we know it wouldn't end on her birthday. Now, all of this made perfect sense to Destiny because her thoughts were getting blenderized from lack of medication. I call it blenderized because that's what my thoughts feel like when I'm in a psychotic episode. I can't think straight. My thoughts are all over the place, and they make sense to me, but they wouldn't make sense to anyone else. But they make perfect logical sense to me. After completely going off her meds, Destiny deteriorated really quickly, and her parents and Jen, her school therapist, put her on a wait list for an early onset psychosis intervention program in Boston. The day a bed opened up, Destiny's mom went to school to try to pick her up and drive her there. But Destiny was not having it because of her delusions and paranoia around her birthday. That is where this reading begins, and it starts off in the mother's perspective. Mom, will you go willingly in the car with your mom, or do we need to call an ambulance? Jen asked Destiny, who was sitting in a chair in Jen's office, legs curled into her chest, with her arms wrapped around them, and Blinky clutched under her right arm. No hospital, Destiny panted. Can't go to hospital. We need you to go to... Hang on, guys. Just gotta plug in my laptop. Minor technical issue. There we go. I think I have to start all over. There we go. Sorry about that, guys. We need you to go to the hospital to get a little more help and support than we can give you on an outpatient basis, Jen explained to Destiny. Destiny's bright blue eyes were wildly darting around the room. Dan and Brian tensed slightly as they held their positions, guarding both exits to the room. Dad and I love you so much and are just looking for ways to get you feeling better, I explained to her. But I could tell by her gaze that she had already checked out into her full psychosis mode. She unfurled her skinny, gastroparesis-shrunken, 4'10", 70-pound body and went running straight for the door. Of course, Dan was standing there blocking it, but she went running for it like she thought she could just run straight through him and the closed door. Dan grabbed her and wrapped her in a bear hug. You need to stay in this room right now, Dan told her. Take a few deep breaths and relax. Destiny showed no comprehension of Dan's words and tried to fight and struggle to get his arms off of her. Relax, Destiny. You're okay. You're safe. You just need to calm down, Jen said to her as Dan continued to hold her squirming and thrashing body. I felt like I was watching the worst horror movie in the world. I think we're going to need to have her go by ambulance to the hospital, Jen said to her. Jen said to me as Dan continued to hold her squirming and thrashing body. Dan and Brian attempted to console Destiny, while at the same time containing her in the room to keep her safe. Jen slipped out to make the phone call to get an ambulance. I stayed in the room trying to talk to Destiny and let her know how much I loved her. She was just screaming about how she couldn't go to the hospital because she had to kill herself before her birthday. Don't worry, I'll keep you alive, I promise, she kept telling me, before lapsing into hysterical tears and then making more strange comments about how she was going to try to be less evil and save the world from the pain she'd caused. I'm sorry for the evil. I will delete the evil. I will save your life, she kept promising me. I love you so much, I kept telling her. Your birthday is almost 6 full months away, and you're not evil. Having you as my child has made my life complete. You've already saved it. She couldn't seem to comprehend this. When the ambulance arrived, she began screaming at the top of her lungs and tried to fight them off with everything she had in her, but they strapped her down to the stretcher and took her to the ER anyway. At the ER, they explained to me that she would need to be medically cleared before she could be transferred to the psych hospital. But they have a bed waiting for her, I tried to explain. I would have driven her there myself, but couldn't because of the state she's in. I gestured toward Destiny, who was strapped to the ER gurney, screaming at the top of her lungs about nonsense and trying to use her teeth to bite off the restraints. She was coming pretty close. It doesn't matter. The policy is she has to be medically cleared, the nurse told me. Well, how long will that take, I asked. It may be a while. We are very busy tonight. A lot of very sick people coming in. She could lose her bed at the other hospital, I tried to explain. I'm sorry, I can't change the policy, the nurse told me briskly, and walked away, not seeming to realize that their dumb policy could affect the whole trajectory of my child's life. We waited 5 hours for a doctor to come in for 5 minutes, to press on her stomach, listen to her lungs, order blood work and an injection of Haldol, and pronounce her medically cleared. By the time he did, her bed at McLean in Boston was no longer available. Instead, we waited in the ER another 12 hours before she was transferred to Haverford Hospital, where she had been admitted multiple times before. I drove up to sign her in after the ambulance picked her up from the ER to bring her 2 hours and 2 states from home to the child adolescent unit of Haverford Hospital. On the way home, I called Alan and just stayed on the phone with him the entire way, crying until I was all dried out, like a worm caught on the sidewalk in the sunlight after a summer storm. Putting Destiny in the hospital never got any easier. Whenever I signed those admission papers, my heart always got heavy as lead in my chest. But we never had any other choice. Destiny had been hospitalized at least 15 times in the last 6 years. Alan and I lived on a constant edge. What was Destiny going to do next? Would this next issue be serious? The ultimate question was, would this next issue kill her? We had tried therapy. We had tried medication. We had tried therapeutic schools. We had tried respite. We had tried intensive outpatient services. And we were still living in a pressure cooker. The night I got home from signing Destiny into Haverford Hospital for the 4th time, instead of having her admitted to McLean's early onset psychosis program that might have been able to substantially turn her life around, I slept fitfully. I dreamt of Destiny falling just past my grip down an Alice in Wonderland style hole and woke up in a panicked sweat. Alan was awake too. "You okay?" he asked me. "Bad dream," I told him once I caught my breath. "Me too," Alan admitted. We curled our sweaty bodies around each other. I leaned my head against his chest. I could hear his heart pounding away fast. "Somehow we'll get through this," he assured me. I nodded and kissed his red-haired chest, but didn't speak. I knew that if I spoke, I would cry, and I was afraid that once I started crying, I wouldn't be able to stop. He pulled me towards him, put a hand under my chin, and cupped my face toward his. Then he leaned in and gave me a long, hard kiss on the lips. I melted against him, breathing in his Old Spice scent, feeling his orangey red goatee tickle my strawberries and cream complexion, and tried to just let my love for Alan take me away from everything else in the world that was wrong. After the two of us made a desperate, fierce kind of love to each other, we finally passed out, our bodies still hooked together, clinging to each other like life preservers from a shipwreck in the middle of the ocean. The next morning we woke up, still feeling exhausted. I managed to drag myself out of bed despite that. After I forced my way through normal morning routines, I called up Dr. Aiden, Destiny's psychiatrist at Haverford Hospital. He was always her usual psychiatrist there. "Hey, this is Bonnie Higgins, Destiny's mom." I introduced myself over the phone. "Hey, Bonnie, how are you doing?" asked Dr. Aiden. "Okay. Well, really worried," I corrected myself. "Destiny seems worse than usual." "I know. She's struggling a lot," agreed Dr. Aiden. "Do you know why?" I asked. "There could be millions of reasons," Dr. Aiden explained. "It could be that she's more stressed than usual. It could be physiological changes due to her growing more. It could be that she needs a different dose of medications. It could be that she needs different medication altogether. It could be that her gastroparesis is flaring up and she's not absorbing the medication correctly. I'm still trying to figure it out. We're going to send her out to the medical unit to get an NJ tube placed, at least, so that we can nourish her and get the more stable levels of medication into her. She does have some lucid moments. we have her sleeping in the quiet room at night. My hope is that we can do some medication adjustments and get her at least back to baseline, Dr. Aiden explained to me. I haven't told her about the residential plans yet, I let Dr. Aiden know. That's probably good. I would wait until she's more stable, Dr. Aiden agreed. Eventually, we're all going to have a family meeting. Just let me know when, I told him. When I went to visit Destiny again, she looked awful. She had lost even more weight, and her tiny child-sized clothes hung on her awkwardly bony frame. There were dark circles under her eyes that left shadows over her whole face. She was wearing a tank top with a strawberry on it, and there were bruises shaped like handprints encircling both of her twig-like upper arms. What happened to your arms? I asked. They grabbed me and held me down, Destiny explained sadly. They don't understand that I need to leave. I can't stay here. Why do you need to leave so badly? I questioned her. I have to die before my birthday, so I don't get sucked in so that the whole world doesn't get screwed up and out of place, she told me. So much for those moments of lucidity that Dr. Aiden had promised were occurring. I love you so much, Destiny, I told her when I couldn't think of anything else to say that would be encouraging. Destiny threw her skeletal body into my arms, and I gave her a big hug. Somehow, it will all be okay, I tried to reassure her. When visiting hours were over and it was time to leave, I got a sick feeling inside me again. Please don't go, Mom, or at least take me with you, Destiny cried. I'll call you tomorrow morning, and I'll come back to visit in a couple of days, I promised her. I can't stay here a couple more days. I need to go home, Destiny pleaded with me. Not yet, I told her. For a second, I honestly thought that I was going to vomit up the bag of pretzels I'd eaten on the drive down. A staff member let me out the set of double-locked doors. They clanged shut heavily behind me, separating my only daughter from the rest of the world. The next time I saw Destiny, she was able to pay attention and focus through almost 2 whole games of rummy, but she was still struggling with delusions. She was still convinced that she had to kill herself before her birthday, and because of that, she was still hell-bent on escaping the locked unit to achieve her goal of suicide. Dr. Aiden had advised that I not argue about the delusions with her, because it would just cause more agitation. He explained that she was not at a point at which she could be reasoned with. Because she was still so delusional, she remained on line-of-sight precautions. Alan and I had our hopes pinned on the residential treatment. It was something we hadn't tried yet. Maybe residential treatment was the answer, the secret key that would open up the world back up for our destiny. The problem was that we didn't know how long a wait it would be before a bed opened up in a facility. The other problem was that at the moment, Destiny was too out of control, too sick to be placed in a residential facility. If we can't get her symptoms under control, she'll have to be placed in a long-term state hospital before residential can even be considered, Dr. Aiden had explained to us sadly. While a residential treatment center, in our minds, was a viable treatment option that might save Destiny's life, a long-term state hospital felt like giving up on her, like committing her to a lifetime full of institutions and mental illness. Every day when we called her, we tried to read into her voice, to see if she was doing better, to see if she was rounding the corner. Can I come home soon? She would ask every time we spoke to her. Not yet, we would sigh, the words burning more every time we spoke them. And now it switches to Destiny's perspective. The bad man and the storyteller were trying to pull me under and drown me. I took the pills they gave me because I did notice that the pills helped clear things a little, but they still didn't completely stop the onslaught of hallucinations. Some of the time, I knew that the incoming sensory data were just hallucinations, but other times it was too hard to tell realities apart. I spent a lot of time in the quiet room, strapped down to the papoose board, vulnerable and at the mercy of everyone around me. When I was strapped to the papoose board, I would feel so panicked that I would flail and struggle against it, but that never did any good. The sweat and tears would just pour off my body and drench me. After I was released from the papoose board, I would always feel wobbly and like my limbs were made of jelly for a while. I would shakily wait in the corner of the quiet room until the nurse on the other side of the locked door told me that I could go back to the day room or sleep off the sedation in my room. For the first couple of weeks, everything was too much of a mess inside my head, but at the end of the second week, the bad man and the storyteller were much quieter. My thoughts were operating more linearly, and I could pay more attention to the world around me. It was like I had spent a long time trapped inside a frenetically shaken kaleidoscope, and had finally emerged back into a more normal reality that wasn't dancing and spinning around me too quickly for me to process anything. As things in my head began to make more sense, I asked Jan, one of the nurses, how long I'd been on the unit. "You've been here 2 weeks," she told me. I nodded. 2 weeks was a long time. I was doing better, so maybe I was close to discharge. "Do you think I can leave soon?" I asked Jan. "That's up to the doctor," Jan told me, "but a lot of people are really worried about you. You've been struggling very intensely for a long time, and we want to find the best way to help you." "I think I'm doing better now, though," I told Jan. "Yeah, you seem like you're thinking a lot more clearly and feeling a lot calmer," she agreed. I nodded again, feeling pacified. I was convinced that I was almost ready to go home, and still assumed in my head that other people would agree. Because reality was now clearer and more orderly for me, I began to notice the other kids on the unit. There was a girl named Lily who cut herself on purpose. She had just been reunited with her birth father a month ago. Her birth father visited often, and they would sit super close to each other and talk in whispers. There was a girl named Emma who also cut herself and had attempted suicide. She always asked for PRN, as needed, doses of medication, even when she was bordering on comatose. Every once in a while, she would freak out and hurt herself by scratching her arms or banging her head. Staff would drag her to the quiet room, where she would scream and cry and carry on. Sometimes I would hear the awful ripping sound of Velcro, and I knew that Emma was being strapped to the papoose board. There was a girl named Ashley who cut herself with anything and everything she could get her hands on. She had been admitted and sent home and then brought back several days later. Then there was a boy named Brian who was there for explosive anger issues and always asked for the radio. He would blast country music or pop and sing along with it, and refused to turn the volume down until staff took the radio back. There were a whole lot of other kids as well, but those 4 kids actually talked to me sometimes. Every day we had different groups. Some groups were on the unit, and other ones were off the unit. I was only allowed to go to the on-unit groups because I was on line-of-sight precautions, and therefore was on red level. Line-of-sight precautions meant just what it sounded like. I always had to be in staff's line of vision, so they could keep careful track of me. I had to sleep on my mattress on the floor of the quiet room at night to make sure I was still in line of sight. As long as they let Blinky stay with me, I didn't really care too much. The only status more restrictive than line-of-sight precautions was one-to-ones, where you had to have a staff signed solely to you to keep you at arm's length at all times, and they would switch staff every couple of hours. There were 3 different levels. Red level meant you were restricted to the unit completely. Yellow level meant you could go off the unit to some groups, ones that were in the building. Green level meant that you could go to all the groups, even the outdoor ones. I wanted to go to off the unit so badly, but Dr. Aiden said that I had to demonstrate that I could remain in control of my behavior for a longer time before I could be moved to yellow level. But I've been here 2 weeks, I pleaded. Yes, and you've been in and out of the quiet room and restraints every day of those 2 weeks. I hung my head and didn't say anything else. For the next several days, I did everything I was supposed to. I took my meds, I went to groups, and I stayed out of restraints. They had sent me out to a medical hospital to get another NJ tube placed after a conversation with Dr. Langley and Dr. Aiden and a dietitian. My weight was dangerously low. My labs and urine were all wacky, and I was unable to hold down enough food by mouth to live off of. Now, they were giving me my meds crushed up and mixed with water in the tube so that my medication levels wouldn't be affected by my abnormal absorption in my stomach from the gastroparesis. With my new medication Abilify and my increased doses of Haldol and Tegretol, and me getting my meds delivered directly to my small intestine, the bad man and the storyteller were so much quieter. It was a lot easier to control myself. Plus, my thoughts were so much more logical and less scrambled as well. I spent my free time drawing animals in the sketchbook my mom had brought in for me. I've noticed that you are doing much better, Dr. Aiden told me. I smiled. I'm feeling better too, I told him. So can I go home soon? We're going to have a family meeting to discuss that, he told me. I let out all the air I'd been holding in. I assumed that the family meeting was going to be a discharge meeting, and that this chapter of the nightmare that was my life would almost be over. On the day of the family meeting, I was kind of nervous anyway. We had our usual community meeting in the morning. When it came to my turn, I took a deep breath. My name is Destiny Higgins, I began. Right now, I am feeling very nervous, and my goal is to have a positive family meeting today and to communicate assertively at the meeting. I threw in some of the buzzwords that we're supposed to use in the community meeting check-in format. Does anyone have any comments for Destiny? Asked the group leader. Good luck at your meeting, Emma smiled at me. I smiled back. Despite all of my nerves, I was still fairly certain that the end result of the upcoming meeting would be discharge plans. I was prepared for emotional confrontations, but I was also prepared to go home. The meeting was scheduled for 2 o'clock in the afternoon, so I went to all my groups earlier in the day. Ashley was getting prepared to get discharged for the 3rd time. I don't feel ready, though, she told Emily, Lily, and I. Don't you want to go home, though? I asked her. No, I'll just cut myself some more if I go home, she shrugged sadly. I looked around to see if any staff were paying close attention. They weren't, so I lightly brushed Ashley's scarred arm. There was a strict no physical contact between patients rule that I was violating. Maybe it will be better this time, I told her gently. Ashley just nodded. Silent tears were dripping down her face. Lily slipped Ashley a small piece of paper. It's my phone number, she whispered. There was another, quite routinely broken rule about not exchanging contact information. Around 2 o'clock, I heard the buzzer of the door to the unit. It was my parents. I ran over and gave them each a huge hug. It was so hard not seeing them every day. I had missed them so much that it hurt. My parents were my best friends. Dr. Aiden emerged from one of the unit's offices. Wendy and I are going to meet with your parents for a little bit alone, and then we'll call you in, he explained. I nodded and retreated to my spot on the blue plastic couch, where I hugged Blinky and buried my face in her wool, breathing in her special smell that always made me feel calmer. Everything about her always made me feel calmer. After what seemed like hours, but according to my watch was only 20 minutes, Dr. Aiden came out of the office to call me in. The room felt heavy and charged as I entered, with Blinky safely tucked under my arm. "Hey, Destiny," Wendy the social worker greeted me. She was smiling, but her smile was tense. My dad's eyes were moist from tears. My mom had several stray tears meandering down her face. I instantly knew that this was not going to be just another discharge meeting. Suddenly, I had difficulty swallowing, and it wasn't just from the NJ tube in the back of my throat. "Can I go home soon?" I managed to choke out. "Destiny," Dr. Aiden began. I didn't like the way he'd said my name. It was weighted too heavily. I squeezed my fists together, so tight my nails bit into my palms. "This has been your 4th psychiatric hospitalization this year," Dr. Aiden told me. "And you have been bouncing in and out of hospitals for the last 6 years. It seems like you need more intensive help than just outpatient therapy. Your parents and Wendy and I believe that you deserve a better quality of life. Plus, your parents are living in a state of constant panic over what you might do next when you're home. I can never relax. I'm always worried about what you're going to do next. We can't live like that. It's just too much stress on everyone," my dad explained. "We love you so much, and we just want what's best for you," my mom added. I didn't like the way this was going. The heaviness from the room had invaded my gut. I felt so weighted down that I was scared I would sink through the floor. "What are you guys trying to say?" I finally asked. "They're trying to explain to you that we have decided you need to be in a residential treatment facility to get more intense and long-term help," Wendy explained to me. Suddenly, I wished that I had sunk through the floor. "Residential?" I choked out. Everyone in the room nodded. I couldn't swallow. I was choking on my own spit. I had been desperately trying to avoid being sent to residential for years. I didn't want these last 5 minutes to be real. I wanted to wake up and have my real family meeting and have it be a discharge meeting. Blinking several times, I squeezed my eyes open and shut to see if the meeting would dissolve away, to see if I could wake up. But I didn't. Now there were tears in my eyes. "Please, I'll be so well behaved if I go home. I'll do everything perfectly. Please. Can I just have one more chance?" I begged desperately. "Honey, we can't take you home. It's not a punishment. We just need to get you more help," my mom tried to explain to me. Before I could stop them, I could hear sobs pouring out of me. "I just want to go home," I cried. My dad rubbed my back. "I know," he told me. The tears that had been welling up in his eyes were now sliding down his cheeks. I had never seen my dad cry before. Seeing my dad cry like that made something inside me break open. My tears became Niagara Falls as they gushed down my face with so much power, while guttural noises ripped their way out of my throat that was already chronically sore from the new NJ tube they had just placed. I had made my dad cry. My parents were rejecting me. I was going to have to spend a significant amount of time in a strange place where I knew they would have a lot of rules that I wouldn't be able to follow. The meeting continued on as Dr. Aiden explained how they were going to be placing a brand new type of feeding tube called a GJ tube in the near future, and how it would require minor surgery, but that they would keep me comfortable and be better than the on and off NJ tubes I'd had over the last 6 years. He said it would help me stop losing so much weight, and it would allow me to drink more by mouth because it would give me the ability to drain back out of my stomach what I drink for pleasure through my mouth. Your medications will go through that tube better as well, because they'll be less likely to clog it. So you'll continue to have more even levels of medication in your bloodstream. It should help you a lot. We just need to wait until you're a little more stable, and we know you won't try to pull it out during one-year episodes." Some of what he said sank in, but I was still stuck on the whole residential thing. I was being thrown out of my house and to the wolves. How could they? And that is the end of Chapter 4. I will be picking up with Chapter 5 next time. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for watching this YouTube video. Don't forget to follow me on my website at www.beccapava.org, beccapava.org. And I hope to see you all again soon. I'm glad you stayed with me for the long haul. Thank you again. Happy reading, everyone. Bye.